Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have.
That actually shows the tree of life, flanked by divine beings. You can see here the Anunnaki on each side.
In 1849, British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard uncovered something that should not exist beneath the ruins of ancient Nineveh, buried under thousands of years of sand and stone. When scholars eventually started decoding it, they found something that stopped the work cold. The disk was a 4,000-year-old star map, 70 systems across the visible sky, each one assigned a symbol. Most of those symbols said the same thing, but one path carried a different mark. Unlike anything else on the disk, one direction only, set aside for the being the Sumerians described as the one who brought knowledge down from the sky to Earth. Why that can't be coincidence is the whole story, and it starts with what the Sumerians were never supposed to know. Something contacted Earth. Something contacted Earth on August 15, 1977, not a greeting. 72 seconds of narrowband radio on exactly 1,420 megahertz. The one frequency that any civilization in the galaxy would already know, because the hydrogen line is everywhere, and anything smart enough to build a radio telescope already knows what frequency it broadcasts on. The signal hit the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University, spiked to 30 times the background noise, and then stopped. Astronomer Jerry Emmon found it in the printout 3 days later. He circled it with a red pen and wrote one word in the margin: wow. In the 47 years since, every telescope pointed at that region has picked up nothing. The signal never came back. We have no source. We have no explanation. But what we do have is a direction. Now here's the part that nobody in mainstream science has put into a paper. 4,000 years before that signal arrived, a civilization on the other side of the world built a star map. They divided the entire visible sky into 3 paths. Each path went to a different divine being, and the path they aimed directly at Sagittarius, at the heart of the Milky Way, they gave to one being alone, the one whose only written purpose, repeated across thousands of surviving clay tablets, was to come down from the sky and bring knowledge to Earth. They called him Ea. And according to their own records, he didn't stay. He came once, handed over everything humanity needed to move forward, and then left. That is not a coincidence mainstream science has addressed. It is a question nobody has officially asked. And before we ask it properly, we need to understand what the Sumerians actually knew, because what they knew should not have been possible. The Sumerians. The Sumerians were supposed to be primitive, Bronze Age people with naked eyes and clay that came up around 4,500 years ago in what is now southern Iraq. They invented writing, built the first cities, developed irrigation and early math. Impressive, but still primitive by our standards. No telescopes, no satellites, no way to see beyond what the naked eye could catch from the ground on a clear night. The bright stars, the visible planets, the moon. That was their ceiling. The numbers say otherwise. In 1912, German astronomer Franz Xaver Kugler sat down with a clay tablet sitting in room 55 of the British Museum. It's called the Venus Tablet of Amisadika. It holds a 21-year record of Venus rising and setting, day by day, without a single gap. Not a poem, not a rough guess. A precise log, accurate enough that modern astronomers still use it to pin down specific dates thousands of years in the past. Kugler wasn't looking for anything strange. He was trying to understand how the Babylonians did their math. What he found stopped him cold. The precision inside those 21 years was more than any single human lifetime of watching the sky with the naked eye could produce. Someone had access to a data source that shouldn't have existed. A longer history, a better record, something. He didn't have an answer. He just had the numbers, and they didn't fit. But that wasn't even the strangest part. The Babylonians, who inherited everything from the Sumerians, pushed it further. They used a cycle of 223 lunar months to predict when eclipses were possible from any point on Earth, not just from their own city, from anywhere on the planet. Research by Liz Brack-Bernson and John Steele, published in 2005, confirmed those predictions held to within hours. Stop and think about what that actually requires. To predict an eclipse visible from the other side of the planet, you can't just watch the sky from one spot on the ground. You need a working model of the Earth, Moon, and Sun as a three-dimensional moving system. You need to understand the solar system as a structure, not just as a ceiling you can see from below. Their solar year calculation was accurate to within minutes of our modern figure. No instruments, no scientific method, but the math still checks out. So, where did it come from? The Sumerians had one answer, the same answer, across thousands of clay tablets, spanning centuries. They didn't work any of it out on their own. It was given to them by beings they called the Anunnaki, who came down from the sky, walked among humans. In the poem, Enki and the World Order, one of the oldest surviving literary texts in human history, Ea is described organizing the functions of the earth, assigning knowledge to its keepers and departing. The Anunnaki are described in these texts as a council of beings who descended into a world that needed names, rules, and the crafts that make cities possible. They handed over measurement, astronomy, agriculture, and medicine. Then they went back to wherever they came from. Modern scholars call this mythology. Fair enough. But here's what that mythology doesn't explain. If the knowledge was made up, it should look made up. The Venus tablet is not made up. The eclipse predictions are not made up. The solar year calculation is not made up. And every time the Sumerians are asked, in their own words on their own clay tablets, where any of this came from, the answer is always the same: the ones who came down. Mythology doesn't produce eclipse predictions accurate to within hours, and the Sumerians never changed their story, not once. What if they were telling the truth? The answer to that question is buried inside a palace that burned to the ground in 612 before the Common Era. And the only reason we know any of this is because of a king who was never supposed to rule. The library that almost didn't survive. Ashurbanipal was never supposed to be king. He was the youngest son. While his brothers trained for war, he was sent to the temples to learn reading and writing and the old texts. In a dynasty built on military conquest, that was not the path to a throne. He was being prepared for a quiet life of scholarship. Then his brothers died. The most powerful empire in the ancient world fell to a man who'd spent his childhood with a reed stylus in his hand. Most conquerors take gold. Ashurbanipal took knowledge. When his armies swept across Mesopotamia, Babylon, and the Levant, he sent agents ahead with one specific order: find the old texts. Every city his empire swallowed, he stripped its libraries and copied its tablets. He wasn't collecting for prestige. He was hunting for something older than his own civilization. In his own inscriptions, carved in stone to last forever, he wrote that he could read tablets from before the flood. Historians treated that as bragging, but Ashurbanipal didn't just say it. He spent decades acting on it. He had texts translated from older Sumerian into Akkadian before the language barrier of passing centuries could seal them away. He built an entire cataloging system inside the palace at Nineveh, organizing the tablets by subject matter in a way that modern librarians would recognize. Whatever he believed those pre-flood tablets contained, he thought it was worth the resources of an empire to preserve. The library he built held about 32,000 clay tablets, organized, cataloged, and stored with care. In 612 before the Common Era, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes surrounded Nineveh and burned it to the ground. The palace collapsed. The Assyrian Empire ceased to exist inside a single season, and the fire saved everything. Clay tablets don't burn, they bake. The same heat that destroyed the palace hardened every tablet and sealed them inside the rubble like insects in amber. When Layard dug through that rubble in 1849, he found them almost exactly as Ashurbanipal had left them. 2,500 years later, near perfect. The catastrophe that ended the empire preserved the knowledge the empire had spent generations collecting. Here's what most people miss: the library isn't closed. In 2015, archaeologists working at the same Nineveh site found new cuneiform tablets from Ashurbanipal's reign. New material, still in the ground, coming out alongside a 20-foot statue of a winged bull that had been sitting under the soil since 612 before the Common Era. The mound at Kuyunjik is large. Layard dug into it. He didn't empty it. Whatever Ashurbanipal was preserving, we haven't found all of it yet. Among the tablets Layard did find was Emul.Apin, the star map. The system Ashurbanipal had copied from an older original, which was copied from something older still. Generation after generation, someone kept copying it because whoever held it believed it was too important to lose. The question now is, what were they so afraid of losing? The map they left behind. Emul.api means the plow star, named after the first constellation listed. 2 clay tablets listing about 70 stars and constellations, dividing the entire visible sky into 3 paths running east to west. The northern path was the path of Enlil, king of the Babylonian gods. The middle path was the path of Anu, the sky god himself. And the southern path was the path of Ea. But Mul Apin wasn't the first time anyone had drawn these 3 paths. Before it, there was an older list sitting in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin under the designation VAT 9416, the 3 stars, each catalog, compiled around 1200 before the Common Era, 2 centuries before Emul Apin. It lists 36 stars, organized into the same 3 paths, the same southern path, the same assignment to Ea, which means the framework wasn't invented when Mul.apin was compiled. It was already ancient by then, but also copied from something older still. The original source of the 3-path system goes back further than any surviving text can reach. We don't know where it started. We only know it was copied, again and again, by people who clearly believed it was too important to let die. So, who drew it first? The Sumerian texts are specific about what Ea does. He is the lord of the Abzu, the subterranean freshwater understood as the source of all knowledge. Ea was not a warrior, not a ruler of worlds. He crosses from the divine world into the human one, hands over what people need to advance, and leaves. One visit, one delivery, then gone. His path runs through Scorpius, through Sagittarius, through Capricornus, aims straight at the galactic center, the most star-packed region of the Milky Way. Ask any modern astronomer where in our galaxy intelligent life is most likely to exist, and most will point there. Oldest star systems, most stars, the longest time for complex chemistry to develop. The Sumerians aimed the path of their knowledge giver at that exact spot, 3,000 years before any instrument existed that could confirm it was the most star-rich region of the galaxy. But before we get to that star, we need to talk about the disk, because the disk is where things stop making sense. The disk they cannot explain. Nobody expected the disk to be a problem. When Layard dug it out of the ruins in 1849, scholars looked at it and saw what they expected to see. A circular clay tablet, 8 sections of cuneiform, an omen chart, the kind of routine divinatory tool that any large Mesopotamian collection would contain dozens of. They cataloged it as K8538, noted about 40% of it was missing from when Nineveh burned, and filed it away. For 150 years, it sat. Then, in 2008, Alan Bond picked it up. Bond wasn't an archaeologist, he was managing director of Reaction Engines Limited, one of Britain's leading aerospace firms. He and Mark Hempsel, a senior lecturer in astronautics at the University of Bristol, ran the tablet's markings through computer models of the ancient night sky. They weren't looking for what scholars expected to find. They were looking at it the way an engineer looks at a set of technical specifications. What they found made the academic world very uncomfortable. K8538 was not an omen chart. It was an observation log, a Sumerian astronomer recording a specific night sky in real time with a level of precision that no instrument available in ancient Mesopotamia should have been capable of producing. Bond and Hempsel argued the disk was tracking a large asteroid on a low 6-degree trajectory over the Middle East, describing its path in enough detail to identify its final destination, a landslide 5 kilometers wide and 500 meters thick near Kofels, Austria, that geologists had never been able to fully explain. The academic response was immediate. Bond and Hempsel were engineers, not linguists. Some of their symbolic readings had no basis in established cuneiform scholarship. The Kofels landslide has been dated thousands of years earlier than their proposed date. Those are real problems. But here is what those problems didn't solve. The disk itself. K8538 was still unexplained. The mainstream reading, that it was a routine omen chart, never actually produced an agreed translation either. The British Museum's own catalogue entry still describes it as a fragment used for astronomical calculations. Calculations. That is the official label after 175 years. A word that admits function without revealing content. And the disk sits in the same library as Mul.apin, inside the same system. inside the same framework that assigned the southern path of the sky to the being who descends. Whatever it was calculating it inside a map that had already decided what that direction meant. That question, what were they watching out there, would sit unanswered for another 69 years until one night in Ohio. The signal. Jerry Ammon wasn't supposed to find anything. He was a volunteer, a college professor who gave his weekends to a shoestring operation at Ohio State University that had been scanning the sky since 1973. The Big Ear telescope was largely built by volunteers, doctors, lawyers, school teachers, people who showed up unpaid because they believed the search mattered. Ammon was one of them. The operation had been running for 4 years by 1977, 4 years of printouts. 4 years of ones and twos, the sky doing what the sky always does, nothing that required a second look. Ammon had reviewed hundreds of these printouts by the time he sat down that day in late August. On August 15, 1977, the telescope swept across a point in Sagittarius. Each patch of sky passed through the detector for exactly 72 seconds before the Earth's rotation carried it out of range. Ammon wasn't there that night. 3 days later, he sat down with the week's stack. He almost missed it. The signal read as 6 E Q U J 5. Each character represented a signal strength. The signal had climbed from nothing, peaked at 30 times background noise, and fallen back to nothing, all within 72 seconds. That rise and fall pattern was the signature of a real point source moving through the fixed detector as the Earth rotated. Not interference, not a satellite, but something at a fixed point in the sky, passing through. 30 times background noise on 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line. Scientists had picked that frequency in the 1950s as the logical channel for any intelligent contact. The reasoning? Hydrogen is everywhere. Every civilization smart enough to build a radio telescope already knows what frequency it broadcasts on. The signal was picked up on only one of 50 possible channels. It was the strongest reading Big Ear had ever recorded from deep space. Ammon circled it in red ink, one word in the margin: wow. But here's the thing about the wow signal that most people skip past. The name made it famous, but the explanations that followed made it complicated. What the signal actually said. The explanations came. They always do. In 2015, astronomers Antonio Paris and Evan Davies proposed the signal came from hydrogen clouds around a passing comet. 2 comets had been in that region of the sky in 1977. It was a serious hypothesis. In 2016, when another comet passed through that same area, researchers pointed telescopes at it, specifically to test the theory. Nothing. No signal anything like the wow. In 2024, astrobiologist Abel Mendez published a new analysis of previously unpublished Ohio telescope data, proposing a different natural cause: a brief hydrogen burst from a highly magnetized neutron star. Magnetars are real. They can produce short, intense narrowband signals, but magnetar bursts spread across a wide area of sky. The wow signal came from one precise fixed point, and the magnetar model struggles with that. No natural explanation accounts for all 3 things together: the frequency, the intensity, and the single fixed point of origin. Researchers searched that region more than 50 times using Big Ear, the Oak Ridge Observatory, and the Very Large Array. Every search came back silent. Ammon himself, when asked about it years later, said he was doubtful it was intelligent in origin. He wasn't even sure it came from outside the solar system. That kind of honesty matters. The man who found it wasn't convinced, and the signal still hasn't been explained. The signal still has no confirmed source. But in 2020, one researcher decided to stop pointing telescopes and start searching the data instead. He wasn't looking for the signal. He was looking for where it came from. The star. Alberto Caballero wasn't working for NASA. He wasn't part of any government program. He ran a YouTube channel about exoplanets and did this research on his own time with data anyone could access. His idea was simple. If the wow signal came from an intelligent source, it came from a star like ours, not a red dwarf, which blasts nearby planets with radiation. A yellow star, stable, and middle-aged, the right temperature and size for a world where something like us could exist. Previous searches had pointed telescopes at the wow signal region and listened. Caballero did something different. He went into data. He searched the Gaia Archive, the European Space Agency's catalog of nearly 1 billion stars, for every sun-like candidate inside the WOW signal's directional window. He built a filter based on temperature, radius, and brightness, the 3 characteristics that most define a star like ours, and ran it across the entire region. He searched 66 candidates and he found one strong match. In November 2020, he published his findings in the International Journal of Astrobiology. He noted that this star, sitting inside the WOW signal's error window, was the only sun-like star in that entire region of sky visible in the Gaia Archive. Not one of several candidates, but the only one. The Breakthrough Listen initiative pointed 2 telescopes at that star in May 2022. The Green Bank Telescope and the Allen Telescope Array, same day. Multiple observation windows. They heard nothing. But here's what that actually tells us. The WOW signal was 72 seconds long. If it was sent once and stopped, a telescope on the wrong day would hear nothing. The entire observation window was a few hours out of 47 years of silence. That's not a ruled out result. That's barely a start. And here's where the Sumerian framework becomes hard to wave away. In the texts, Ea doesn't make repeated visits. He comes once, delivers what humanity needs, leaves, one arrival, one handoff, then silence. That's his entire defined role across every Sumerian and Babylonian text that mentions him. The signal came once, 72 seconds, then 47 years of silence. What if the 72 seconds wasn't a first attempt at contact? What if it was Ea doing exactly what the tablets say he does? One delivery, no return address, no follow-up. We picked it up on August 15th, 1977. We didn't understand it. We circled it with a red pen. We spent 47 years waiting for something the Sumerians already told us would never come. Because Ea never comes back. The tablets are clear on that. Now, place everything side by side, not as a theory, just as the record of what we actually know. The payoff. Ashurbanipal left an inscription that puzzled historians for 150 years. He said he could read tablets from before the flood. They assumed it was royal arrogance. But Ashurbanipal spent the resources of an entire empire acting on that claim. He sent agents to every conquered city not for gold, but for old texts. He translated them before the language barrier of passing centuries could seal them away. He preserved Mul.Apin, the Venus tablet, and 8538 inside the most organized library the ancient world had ever seen. He was trying to hold on to something he knew was slipping away, something that came from a time, and possibly from a source, that he understood to be beyond his own civilization's beginning. The pre-flood tablets he spoke of weren't a boast. They were a warning. The knowledge existed. It was old. And if no one kept copying it, it would disappear entirely. The fire that ended his empire baked those tablets and saved them by accident. Layard found them 2,500 years later. New tablets are still coming out of that same ground today. Whatever Ashurbanipal buried, we haven't found all of it. 2 of the tablets he preserved contain a map pointing at one direction in the sky. This is where the knowledge bringer comes from. In 2020, one researcher searching nearly 1 billion stars found a single sun-like match in that direction, 1,788 light-years out. Here's the question no peer-reviewed paper has formally asked. If the Sumerians were telling the truth, then what we received on August 15, 1977, wasn't a mysterious anomaly. It was Ea doing what the tablets say he always does, arriving once, delivering what is needed, leaving. And we, having forgotten the map, having buried the tablets in museum drawers, having called the disk a set of calculations we can't explain, treated a message as a mystery. 2 reasonable people can look at all of this and land in different places. If the Anunnaki were mythology, the alignment between the star map and the signal is a coincidence. That's a fair position. But here's what isn't up for debate. The Sumerians had knowledge they shouldn't have had. They said it came from one direction. Modern astronomy confirmed that direction points at the most star-dense region of the galaxy. The only unexplained signal in the history of the search came from that direction. And K8538, with its still unexplained calculations, belongs to the same library as the map that marked that direction as the territory of the one who descends. The star is 2, mass 19, 2, 81982, 1,788 light-years away, in the path of Ea, The Sumerians marked that spot thousands of years before we had a telescope. The question is no longer whether they knew. The question is what exactly they were told. If the Anunnaki were real, if they marked Earth as the contact point, and if that signal was a delivery, the way Ea always delivered, once and then gone, what exactly did we receive? And are we even close to being able to read it?